Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members and guests, and a very warm welcome to another Wine Society virtual wine tasting. My name is Ewan Murray, and I'm the events manager, or one of four events managers at the Wine Society. And we're delighted to welcome today one of our team of currently 10 buyers. That is Matthew Horsley.
Hi, everybody. Good evening.
So today we're going to be going through a little bit of what the Generation Series is about. This year, as you will well know by now, is our 150th birthday. And we're celebrating in all sorts of ways, be it through events or be it through wines. And there are two special ranges of wines that we've launched this year. And we're here to talk about one of those today. A little bit of housekeeping. If you've got any questions and you want to put in the chat, then by all means, please do. Let us know what you're drinking, where you're from, what your thoughts are. If you've got any questions, then we can deal with those. We're on one laptop today, so let's put all the questions into the chat, and we'll see if we can follow that. And if we've got any answers, then we'd be happy to give those to you. But Matthew, let's, without further ado, what is the Generation Wine Series?
Very good question. Yes, sorry, there was a piece of cardboard that was distracting me. Yeah, very good question. So the Generation Series is a range of wines which has been about 4 years in the making. It started around the middle of 2020 when, I hate to bring up the subject of lockdown again, but we were in very much lockdown and we needed to fill our times with something to do. And for the last 10 years, as buyers, as a team of buyers, we had been collating wines to be released in our 150th year for the anniversary series, which is a fine wine focused range of wines. And the Wine Society has changed a lot in the last 10 years, as has the world of wine. And it was getting to halfway through 2020 and we suddenly thought, crikey, we've got this range of fine wines which are extremely exciting, very premium, but also quite limited. And we've realized that it was probably going to appeal to a fairly small percentage of the membership as a whole. And so we started to come up with ideas of how we could celebrate our birth year, not just through a single release of wines that would be released at the start of the year, but celebrate throughout the year by showcasing not just the Wine Society's history, but also the Wine Society's future. And so I came up with this idea that we would split our 150-year history into 4 50-year periods, which obviously doesn't make much sense. And so what we aimed to do was release 4 series of wines, the first 3 summing up the first 150 years of the Wine Society, each in 50-year blocks. Mm-hmm. And then we'd put our money where our mouths are, and we would try and predict. I know predicting the future is a bit of a mug's game, but we wanted to show what we thought would be the key wine themes, stories, styles of the next 50 years of the Wine Society's history. And so we got buying. I put together a shopping list for all the buyers. I basically poured over old lists from the Wine Society, of which we've got records going back into the late 1800s. And so I was looking back through these lists and basically creating a list of the key themes throughout each 50-year period. Put together a shopping list, sent the buyers out on their way, and we started to collate what became the Generation Series. And so we've released 2 of the 50-year periods so far, the first being 1874 to 1924. We recently launched the second 50-year period, so 1924 to 1974, and we are soon to release the third quarter. And what was really exciting from our part as buyers was that the key focus was that these needed to be wines that appealed to the majority of the memberships. They needed to sit in our kind of sweet spot, as we would call that kind of £10 to £20 price bracket. And where possible, we wanted to reflect the styles of the wines that were in those 50-year periods where possible. And so with a few of the wines here, we'll talk a little bit in detail about how we came about creating these wines. We worked collaboratively with a lot of these producers and spoke to them and asked them, what was Rioja like 100 years ago? What was Muscadet like 100 years ago? And tried to recreate those wines so that we could show our members today what members may have been drinking 100 years ago, which I think is quite exciting. But it's been a massive project to pull together. We put together this amazing timeline of the Wine Society's history, obviously spanning 150 years, which now garners the labels of the Generation Series. So from our inception to present day, we put in amazing images of staff members, warehouse. That doesn't sound very exciting, does it? Just the warehouse. But key pieces of collateral, list covers, what have you, from the 150-year period of the Wine Society, and have added on little tidbits, little interesting facts, which you can see on the website. And when it came to creating the labels, we kind of took vignettes from that timeline, or Vineline as we're calling it. Very good. And we've created the labels using those. So in theory, what's quite nice is if you were to have the wines lined up next to each other, they would almost tell the history of the Wine Society as well, which I think is quite fun.
It is a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And going back 150 years, of course, the history of the Wine Society goes back to the wines of Portugal. That's where we started. If you don't know the story, why not? Do take a look on our website. But way back in 1874, there was one of the great exhibitions. It was the last of the great exhibitions, which began, of course, in Hyde Park in 1851. And by 1874, there's supposed to be a series of 10 annual fairs going on, and it never quite came to fruition. There was a fourth one in 1874, and that was held at the Royal Albert Hall. And there were several wine. It was about food and wine and fine art, I believe. And there was a lot of wine that came over to be exhibited, but didn't make its way up from the cellars, basically, and never got tasted. And the exhibitors got a bit miffed. The organizers were asked to do something about it. And they decided to put a few lunches together and get people along, get friends and colleagues along to come and taste the wines. And if they liked them, they could buy a cask or two. And that was very successful. And in the middle of that year, in August, they were so successful, and everyone said they should go and find some more wine now that all that's been sold. And so they founded the International Exhibition Cooperative Wine Society Limited on the 4th of August, 1874. Excuse me. And that's why we're here today, basically. We're no longer in the Albert Hall, sadly. We're in sunny Stevenage, and it is sunny, thankfully, tonight-ish. But the Wine Society has moved on greatly in those 150 years. But the first wine that we ever sold, according to our past chairman, Sir Edmund, Sir, I've just knighted him, Edmund Penning Rousel, was a Bucelas from just north of Lisbon. And we've run out of the full bottles, but we still do have, this is very dinky, we still do have the half bottles. So I've seen some of you in the chat, you've got some of the Bucelas with you. And Matthew is absolutely dying to have a little gasping because it's gone 6 o'clock. The sun is over the Yardom somewhere all the time, of course. But here we go. So this is the Wine Society's Generation Series Bucelas 2022. The half bottles are still available at £7.25. I don't know if some of you I know have got this in your glass, giving it a sniff. It smells absolutely delicious and does exactly what the Orinto grape should be doing, which is what the main grape is in this wine, I believe.
Yeah, it is. That's true. And so this is an example of where recreating the original style of wine was perhaps not as possible as we would like, because it's most likely that the original style of Bucelas that was sold by the Wine Society all 150 years ago was likely a sweet and or fortified style of wine, which in the current appellation, it doesn't really exist anymore. Nobody makes it, certainly not to the scale that we would require or to the price that we would require for this particular range. And so the vast majority of Bucelas now is this dry, refreshing, lightly aromatic style of wine that's, in my mind, it's a little bit like a supercharged Vinho Verde. It's got a bit more weight and it's got a bit more body to it, a bit more alcohol as well. but it's got that lovely light white flower citrus style to it. And I think that the half bottles are showing really, really well at the moment. Naturally, half bottles will mature a little bit faster than full bottles. And so you're starting to see a little bit of color, and that slightly more developed, almost kind of lanolin-like flavors are coming through, which is, I think, really, really rather fun.
No, it is delicious. I'm just looking at we've got the notes here from the original Wine Society list, which described it. What Edmund was saying, Edmund Penny-Rouse was saying, it was a wine popular in Victorian times, as decanter labels demonstrate, but scarcely known today. A medium dry white wine, otherwise called Portuguese hock. I'm not sure whether you could get away with that today. Was sold at 1 shilling and 7 pence a bottle. So around that's about 7.5, 8 pence of today's money. And as Matthew said, it could well have been fortified in the past just to aid its shipment to foreign climes.
But I think for now, it's just so approachable, and I think it's quite an on-trend style now, which is fun. I think we'll see a lot throughout the Generation series how trends or styles of wine 100, 150 years ago have kind of come full circle, and now those trends are back again. So this really crisp, linear, fresh style of white wine, no obvious oak, is very much kind of on trend at the moment.
Yeah, this one comes from Quinta de Romera, in just north of Lisbon, which is where the Bucelas appellation is. It's actually owned by the winemaking giant Sogrape, who own an awful lot of wineries up and down Portugal. But what they do is they own them, they fund them, but they do let the winemakers do their own thing on these estates. And I think this is a fabulous result, really.
I agree. Yeah, it's put together by Joe Locke, MW, who's our Portuguese buyer. And good question in the chat there. Will you have the big bottles back again? No. So unfortunately, with the Generation series and the anniversary range, the fine wine tier, these are one-off exclusives. When they're gone, they are gone. And so, yeah. So grab the halves whilst you can, because they won't be around forever.
Well, we have the advantage that there's tasting going on in the showroom as we speak now. So if we can whiz out at about 7 o'clock and grab some on the way, then that could be we get ahead there. But no, the big bottles won't be coming back. Okay, so that's one from our first series. Now we're going to, I think we'll switch between red and white, if that's all right with you, Matthew.
Absolutely.
So we go through the time. So we're now going to move to our first red wine of the evening, which is the Society's Generation series Rioja. Rioja, which was featured an awful lot in early Wine Society lists.
Yep, so we're sticking with the first release wines here. So these are still wines that reflect the first 50-year period of the Wine Society's history. That's cool.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say this one actually reflects the history of Rioja as well, because it's called the Tercer Año, which means the third year. Because back in those days, I don't think they had Reserva and Gran Reserva and that sort of scale of quality through in the appellation. So you just depended how long it had been bottled. That was, which is pretty obvious, really, if you think about it. It was a 2023 bottling and a 2020 vintage. It's the third year Rioja, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And another key thing with this wine, so Pierre Mansour, our Spanish buyer, he basically spoke to a producer called Hacienda Lopez de Haro, who we've done quite a lot of work with over the last 15, 20 years. They're not our longest supplier by any means, but they are a team that is young and willing to collaborate in such projects such as this. And Pierre basically spoke to him and said, look, how was Rioja made 100 years ago, 150 years ago? What was the style? And really, the key thing that they said was that this was pre-Tempranillo really taking over a lot of the Rioja area. And so a lot of the plantings would have been Garnacha. And so the key thing for this was making it a Garnacha-led style, which this is. And also it was typically a little bit before a lot of the American oak came to Spain, and a lot of that more what we would class as traditional Rioja now, that American oak long maturation in barrel, quite oxidative in style, and a long time spent in bottle after maturation before release. And so now the slight strange paradox is that we would probably now class this as quite a modern style of Rioja, but this is very much the style that was rife 150 years ago. So this slightly darker color, predominantly French oak, more fruit forward, more spicy, a little bit more full bodied, far less oxidative, and I think makes a really nice, juicy, fresh and vibrant style of Rioja.
So things have kind of come full circle, really. So what we call the traditional style back in these days would have been called the modern style.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think it smells fantastic. This was when we first released the first quarter. This is one of the wines I was most excited about. I think it smells absolutely fantastic. You've got so much rich Grenache fruit, that lovely strawberry, cranberry, cherry, and lots of spice on the nose, that kind of nutmeg, a little bit of cinnamon. And the palate should hopefully be really juicy and velvety, not too tannic. And
yeah, I just think it's the weight of it is absolutely spot on, isn't it? And as you say, not too tannic, so it's got those tannins, so it's going to match with your traditional food you would expect it to match with, the lamb, the beans, all that sort of thing, you know, not being stereotypical.
Well,
but that's,
you can tell that we've both been to Rioja probably, and that you go everywhere and everybody serves you
lamb and
beans,
beans.
beans and tomato sauce followed by lamb, which is great.
Yeah, it goes particularly well. But this would be absolutely perfect with that. And also, if your lamb's not too fat, because the tannins aren't too harsh, you don't need your lamb to be too fatty to really sort of counter that. So absolutely delicious.
But it does have this fantastic core of acidity, which if you do have quite a fatty dish, then it will cut through that fat so well. And whilst I do think this is a style of wine that is to be drunk now, I think it will be interesting to see how it develops over the next 6 months to a year and a half. But this isn't something I'd be putting down and aging.
Drinking. I mean, I think our tasting notes say 2026. So, you know, up to a couple of years.
Yeah.
But yeah, not one for the long haul.
Yeah, I think so. And even lightly chilled as well. I'd serve it straight out of the bottle. I wouldn't decant. I think there's a really nice perfume on the palate as well. Grenache gives a really nice perfume, and sometimes if you decant, it can lose that upfront perfume, which I think is a shame. I think this is a wine that should be on the primary side of its fruit, and decanting it may remove that.
Yeah. Cool. Great. Well, that's two very good starters, both coincidentally from the Iberian Peninsula. So that was sort of through to 24, the sort of 100 to 150 years ago, the sort of things that we would have been tasting. And then we're now coming into the period which some people may remember. Just a few, not many. I wasn't drinking at the time. I was only 13 when 1974 came along. But we're going to move on now to the next pair of wines. And the next one I know is one that's very dear to Matthew's heart, because I think it was possibly the first area that you started buying for at the wines.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So we're moving on to, and I love this because it takes you back. If you look at the label, it takes you back here to the old Wine Society logo. It seems so long ago. And this is a Tokai Furmint, so from Hungary, and it's the 2021 vintage. Matthew, maybe you'd like to enlighten us as to what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was quite surprised that when I was looking back through the old lists, that Tokai appeared quite a lot after 1930. But most surprisingly, it wasn't Arzu, it wasn't Essentia, it wasn't late harvest, it was dry styles of Furmint that typically were shown. Now, over the last 4 or 5 years since I've been buying Hungary, which unfortunately I'm actually no longer the Hungarian buyer, so I've passed it on. But I did blend this wine a couple of years ago. And the thing that I've been trying to push really hard over the last 4 years or so is this dry style of Furmint, which seems to slowly be coming back into popularity. That same thread again. And I think more and more people are producing it because Arzu naturally is very difficult to make. You're kind of at the whims of Mother Nature and to make sure that noble rot does occur. It's expensive to make, and also the market for Arzú wines and sweet wines in general is waning. And so a lot of producers were trying to find another way of making a slightly more commercially viable style of wine. And so over the last 10, 15 years, a lot more producers have been offering a dry style of ferment, because they don't need to wait for noble rot. They can ferment it in stainless steel, they can keep it nice and fresh, and they can sell it within a year. And I think it's a style of wine that's really fascinating. I think it ages fantastically well. So I wanted to make sure that for this release, there was a wine that had a little bit of bottle age to it. It's 100% ferment, which I was also super keen on. Some do blend with some harsh Levallois or some yellow muscat, but I wanted to make sure it was 100% ferment because that's what it suggested it was in the older lists. So I blended this back in 2022, and it is, as I said, 100% ferment. It's produced by the Poyos winery, who, it's one of these funny things, kind of when you've got such a long lineage of wine society buyers, you come across a producer that you've never heard of before, and you try the wines, and you're like, whoa, this is amazing. I've discovered this winery. How exciting. I can list the wines and everybody will call me a hero. And I went in to set up the first wine I bought from Poyos, and Toby had bought wine from them about 30 years ago. So instantly that kind of put me back down to earth. But so it's 100% ferment. There's some barrel aged elements in there as well, which I think add a really nice kind of cedar spice to it. 2021 is a very strong vintage anyway for Tokai. And yeah, I had about 6 months barrel aging and then in bottle, and it started hopefully to develop these fantastic waxed lime spicy aromas. I think naturally ferment has got a very citric core. I liken it a little bit to Chenin Blanc in that it's very acid forward. It's quite textural, a bit like Chenin Blanc, but it's got a little bit more spice. Often think apples and ginger, and hopefully this has got a bit of that. But the key thing really was that I was just amazed that there was dry ferment all these years ago. And, you know, I think it shows again that we were kind of trendsetters a little bit, if we can say that.
We can, we do. Quick comment from Mike here, saying he's sorry to hear us say that interest in sweet wine is waning. You know, is it a sign of waning youth? I don't know. I mean, I try and make sure that when I have people around for dinner, I've always got a sweet wine, and sometimes you can bring people around, because I don't so much think it's so much that sweet wines are necessarily less popular. It's just that people don't think automatically of sweet wines.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, it's a very situational drink. It's I'm having a dinner party, or it's Christmas coming up, and therefore I should have a sweet wine because I'm having cheese. But we try and tell the story that you can have sweet wine at all times. And there's so many other times of the year, times of the meal that you can have sweet wines, and it's often fantastic. The slight irony is that a lot of the most commercially popular wines do have quite a lot of residual sugar in them. But it's almost the traditionally sweet wines where, you know, sales are not particularly strong, and it's not for a lot of people, if they don't have the name, or they don't have the brand, or they don't have the volume, it's tough. It's tough to stay commercially, you know, relevant. And I think sweet wines are fantastic, but even I only drink them at certain times. But I think the dry styles and being able to find alternative production methods. So a lot of the producers in Sauternes or Barsac, they're also producing dry wines in order to keep that cash flow.
Yeah, and Keith is saying you can have a sweet wine as an aperitif. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. The French will often have a port. Well, obviously you can have white port as an aperitif, but the French will often have red port, which is ruby port, as an aperitif. And Sauternes will often accompany sort of starters, sort of fatty, greasy, livery starters, those sort of things. There's lots that can go on. And I think the future of sweet wine isn't too many people just think Sauternes. That's not something they like, and on they go. And they do go well with Stilton. Absolutely right, Mike. But there are so many different styles. I mean, we did a tasting just the other day where we've got we're just for a lunch that we're going to be having here at the Wine Society soon, where we had some reef salt from the south of France, from the Roussillon. Absolutely delicious, and it's not one that people often think of. They, you know, Moscato d'Asti, absolutely brilliant, sweet, appley white wine. Just, and the summer's coming in, and if the sun's going to start shining, it's only 5 or 6% as well. So what's not to like? Lovely and fresh. So let's keep that particular flag flying.
Yeah,
but
there's also, it's probably sacrilegious to say it, but a lot of people are talking about, you know, white port and tonic, or sauternes in cocktails. You know, it's sometimes it doesn't have to be the neat wine. Sometimes it can match really nicely as part of a longer drink, which, you know, could be a possible future for some of these wines.
But it's interesting about the Furmint coming round from the sweet to the dry in popularity, because when I started out in the wine trade about 25 years ago, I couldn't stand dry Furmint. But I think that's because actually they'd almost forgotten how to make it.
Yeah,
they're focusing so much on the more expensive, the more profit-minded, if you like, the Azus and the sweets. But actually now it's coming back round again, and it is absolutely delicious.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, a lot of producers are not necessarily focusing just on Azu as well. They're doing late harvest or Samarodny styles, where, you know, it's less legal jargon to jump through in order to produce that particular style of wines.
Less shovelfuls.
Yeah.
Less puts on yours. Yes.
Exactly.
Cool. Good. So that's our Furmint. Now we're going to switch back, and still in our second period of 50 years, we're going to switch to our red wine. Now this is a wine made by some very, very good friends of the Wine Society. We've been doing it. I just poured it into your white wine glass. I do apologize. We've got some water to rinse out there. This is the Society's Generation Series Vin Sobre. It's made by the Jaume family. And I think the first vintage that we bought off the Jaume family was 1979. Which that does go back away. So 45 years we've been working with them. And I know that when we had our exhibition anniversary tasting in Bristol, the Monsieur et Madame Jaume, currently aged, I think, 92 and 90, came over to grace us with their presence. So it's a long-standing relationship.
Yep. And the idea behind this wine, see, the Southern Rhône is a huge part of the Wine Society's portfolio, and has been for a number of years. And, you know, Côte de Rhône has been a huge powerhouse in terms of getting the wines of the Rhône to a UK consumer. And I think that originally it was a no-brainer. We do a Côte de Rhône, but we wanted to focus a little bit more on the quality side of things, because I think Côte de Rhône is a style of wine that can often be slightly lost in terms of quality. It can be fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it can also be quite generic. And so we wanted to focus in on a particular area which may well have contributed significantly to some of the best Côte de Rhônes that we have listed over the last 100 years. And Vin Sobre is definitely one of those areas. For those that don't know where it's located, it's in a fantastic area in that it's relatively high elevation for the Southern Rhône, but also there's a valley to the east which stretches pretty much all the way to the Alps. And so there's huge amounts of cool air and cool breezes that sweep through to create this massive diurnal range and retain this fantastic freshness, which means you can leave the grapes on the vines that little bit longer whilst retaining acidity. And what you're left with is this fantastically concentrated but refreshing style of Côte de Rhône. And we really wanted to celebrate that. And rather than just shoving Côte de Rhône on the front, we wanted to champion Vin Sobre, because it's an amazing area, and it's an area that Marcel, our Rhône buyer, has been championing for a number of years. And I think this is one of the real blockbusters of this range, in that it punches pretty high above its weight. I think it's big, it's rich, but it's wonderfully balanced, and it's got all those bramble, savory, spicy, herbal notes that you want from top quality Syrah and Grenache. And it's I really like it.
Yeah.
I think it's also available in Magnum. I think
It is available in Magnum,
Yeah.
yes, which is good news. That was I can't remember who it was who told me that the problem is with the Magnum, bottles and Magnums. Bottles are too small. What is it? Bottle too big for bottles, too small for one, but a Magnum's too small to share. I can't quite remember what it's about, but anyway.
I think between the two of us, we could put a Magnum away pretty efficiently.
I think we probably could in good time.
Yeah.
If neither were driving and we had a
Of
weekend
course.
to recover.
Yeah. There's bank holiday coming up. So.
Very true, very true. But yeah, no, this is great. We've been dealing with it. So those of you who've been to wine study tastings, particularly of the Rhône Valley wines, will recognise the wines of the Jaumes. You'll even recognise the Jaumes as well, and they are particularly welcoming with open arms to Wine Society members who happen to be passing by. And I know that people do holiday in the south of France and down in the Rhône Valley, so it's definitely worth a detour. Laurence Jaume will look after you very well.
I assume you've been?
Not yet.
What?
No. But I know that my colleague Emma has been, and our erstwhile colleague Anna now lives down there, and she's popped in. She's popped in occasionally.
Yeah, I went on a trip about 6 years ago, I think, and they've got these fantastic old US Army Jeeps, which they drove us around the vineyards on, and it was absolutely fantastic.
We weren't jealous at all when we saw the pictures.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic, and they're just such a lovely family. It's very accommodating, as you say.
They are. Pascal and Richard are running it now. But if you want to picture the family and Marcel, who buys the wines there, then go no further than our website and check out our Growing Together tastings. In fact, go no further than the cover of the recent 1874, which has a picture of Marcel and the family on the front of it.
Which is quite charming, I think.
It is. It is.
But yeah, I think it's rather good. 2021 vintage. So yeah, strong vintage in the Southern Rhône.
No, I think £12.50 is amazing value for money.
I think it's a cracker. And I think that is genuinely one that will age really well. I think it's got enough acidity and freshness of fruit to go the distance. So I bought some myself to have as nice current day drinking, but I'll be putting away, especially some Magnums.
Stash some away in members' reserves. Those Magnums will be good to go for another 6, 7, 8 years.
Yum scrum.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, actually, I want to come back to something on the Tokai, because I was picking up the corks as we went, and we've got, this was the one from the Bucelas, so it's a Diam cork. Sorry, that was the Bucelas. That was the Rioja, which is a Diam cork. There was a more traditional cork from the Jaumes, but Furmint, an Ardia seal, which is an interesting little plastic locking device. How does that work?
Yeah, I must admit, I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not hugely keen on it, but it does keep the wine very secure. It does expand in the bottle, so you do get a pretty good secure hold. The one thing I would say, I noticed that somebody in the chat is using a Coravan. This does have a plastic cap at the bottom, so it basically rules out the use of Coravan, which I do find quite frustrating. But I think the wine's so delicious that if you were to Coravan it once, you'd just want to drink the whole bottle. At least I would anyway. But I would say that because I blended the wine. So yeah, it's a slightly odd plastic with a kind of soft core. So if you take the foil off and notice it looks a bit odd, then don't be surprised.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Right, let's move on. It was just quick because as I opened it, I thought, yeah, I have seen these before, but interesting. Okay, we come down to our last two wines. We're not going to go into the future today. Well, not into the far future of the last 50 years. We'll do that maybe more when we get to the autumn. But we are going to go into our final 50 years, which is 1974 to present day,
which I can remember.
Yes, very good, very good. Yeah. Now, these two wines you haven't been informed of because they haven't yet been launched. They're going to be launched on the 6th of June, but we thought that we'd just give you a sneak preview. There are 11 more wines to be launched on the, I think it's 11? Yeah, 11 to be launched on the 6th of June, which will be available on you'll be able to see them in our 1874 magazine, as well as on the website from the 6th of June. But the first one, and this is an area that, oh, cheers. This is an area that Matthew has just started buying recently. This is the Wine Society's Generation South African Chenin Blanc from Radford Dale.
Yep. Yeah, so it was an interesting one looking at the last 50 years in terms of wine, because it's one that it's probably not the nicest way of summing it up. It's probably when the wine brand started to really become a big thing. And that might give a few hints about what some of the other wines in this quarter may be. But it's when you started expanding way out into other parts of the world, and a lot of the time when kind of European grape varieties were really finding their feet in Southern Hemisphere, especially wine regions. And I don't think we could do this range really without a South African Chenin Blanc. It's been a huge part of Wine Society sales over the last 40 or 50 years, and it's one of those grapes that, despite being French, it's kind of been commandeered by South Africa. And I mean, I would say it being the South Africa buyer, but I think South Africa does Chenin Blanc better than in Loire. And we wanted to partner with somebody who we have a great relationship with. They produced our own label, South African red wine, under our society's label. And Alex Dale of Radford Dale is one of the most delightful people I've ever met, but also impressive. He's an absolute dynamo. And as soon as it was actually Joe that started the conversation about him doing a Chenin Blanc for this range, and it was kind of me that carried it on. And we wanted something that sat kind of politely between our society label Chenin, which is produced for us by Valréas, which is a really nice, fresh, unoaked style of Stellenbosch Chenin, and our exhibition Chenin Blanc, which is produced by Chris Alheit, which is a little bit more oaked, a little bit more serious, a bit more premium. And we wanted something to sit nicely in the middle, so there weren't too many clashes. So we wanted something that was a little bit oaked, had a little bit of weight and texture to it, but it was also really that key South African Chenin Blanc style, which people have become so fond of over the last 10, 20 years in particular, that really crisp, fresh, weighty style of Chenin. And this is actually going to be the first time I've tried it since I was at the winery when I confirmed it back in October. So fingers crossed it's good. It smells nice. That's a good start. Yeah, I think it's got really nice, crisp lime zestiness. There's a little bit of that sheep's woolly lanolin character as well, a little bit of smoky spice. But for me, the texture is the key thing. You know, being Stellenbosch fruit, they've got vines on the Helderberg, so it's fairly warm climate. Helderberg is probably one of the cooler areas of Stellenbosch, but you get that texture, you get that long hang time, you get that weight, whilst retaining that fantastic acidity. A little bit of oak adds a really nice bit of spice, and also helps broaden out the palate as well, and finishes really long, I think. What do you think?
I think it's long, and it's quite pure as well, which I like. I love that purity of fruit. Just a quick mention, James, you were mentioning about you arrived late, and there was some chat on the wines before. We can't see I can't replay the physical chat written down, but we are recording this session so that tomorrow I'll send out a link, and you'll be able to pick up the rest of the conversation from earlier on.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's absolutely delicious, and it's got. What I love about South African Chenin is it's the same and yet so different to the Loire Chenin.
Yeah.
There's just I remember having a conversation with somebody. It was to do with Sauvignon Blanc in South Africa, and somebody was criticizing this South African for, well, your Sauvignon Blancs, you don't know what you want them to be. They're not the Loire and they're not New Zealand. I mean, what are they supposed to be? And he just said, have you ever looked at a map? You know, and this is very, very different. I mean, Chenin must have been brought over by the Huguenots in the 17th century, I'm guessing. And it's just got its own character. There's a purity and a dryness and a minerality about it that I really love.
Yeah, I agree. There's a question there about any skin contact. Only, I think, settled overnight. So no intentional skin contact. But I think there is a nice bit of grippiness to it. I think there is a nice light phenolic grip to it, but not bitter in any way, which is good. And so, yeah, in terms of the producer, so Rafdale are also real kind of figureheads for sustainability in South Africa and really the world. They're one of the real figureheads, and they do amazing things with organic viticulture and also biodynamic practices. They've recently actually bought a organic farm down in Elgin, which, if anybody has been to Elgin or knows of Elgin as a wine region, is basically madness. It's like the wettest area of South Africa, or one of them, and viticulture and farming organically when it's that wet is difficult. It's mainly apples produced down there. In fact, the road just before you get to the site is called Appletiser Road because it's where the Appletiser farms are for all the apples. And so really the money there is in apples and not in grape growing, but it's becoming a very trendy, cool climate area. This isn't from there, but we do have a Sauvignon Blanc from Rafdale, which is from their organic Elgin site, which I think is very exciting, really pure and mineral. This has got a little bit more weight to it, and yeah, I'm really pleased with it. It's from 2023, so it's still youthful, but I think, you know, with another few weeks in bottle, I think it will get better as well. I mean, this is going to age really well, and it'll be 11.95, which again, I think for pretty high quality South African Chenin. Again, of course, I would say that.
You would.
But, I think it's really
But
nice.
no, it is a very good price. And we're working with these guys as well on own label wine. We've just got a red own label wine with them as well.
The Pinotage Syrah, which is a blend of Stellenbosch and Swartland fruit. So yeah, it's a bit of a belter as well. And I think the Pinotage is a grape that perhaps has had a bit of scrutiny over the years, but I think is producing some really exciting Pinotage now. And Syrah just adds a really nice voluptuousness to Pinotage as well. It can be quite tannic, and so with that addition of some Syrah, I think it makes it really, really rather good.
Excellent. Good. Well, we come to our last wine of the evening already. I know. Time flies when you're having fun. Here we go with the Society's Generation Series Barossa Shiraz. I remember. I am old enough to remember. Yes, I am old enough to remember when Australian wines really took off in the UK, particularly the extremely buttery, custardy, creamy, oaky Chardonnays.
Yeah.
Which nobody could get enough of, and now they tend to be a little bit pushed back and for a bit more a more reasonable style. And similarly with the red wines. 80s and 90s and maybe early 2000s, Barossa Shiraz, if it wasn't 15.5% and smacking you around the head with black pepper and tar, then it wasn't really worth.
It wasn't doing the job.
No, it wasn't. But actually, that's not really the style that Wine Society members typically go for, is it?
No, I think, and this is what we tried to do with this wine, or Freddie, our buyer for Australia, has tried to do in the '80s and '90s. The style of Barossa Shiraz was a lot fresher. It was slightly lower in alcohol, and yes, it was still full-bodied and voluptuous, but it wasn't these heavily extracted, oaky, smack you around the chop styles. So, and also that's not the style that's really popular at the moment. So again, we kind of took that and recreated that earlier style before things got heavily oaked and full, and probably quite a lot of residual sugar as well. And I think what we've ended up with is this really nice, almost counterpoint. I think there's big fruit here. It's 14.5, but there's drinkability. I think a lot of the big old school Barossa Shirazes, I think, are fantastic wines, but I have a glass and I'm exhausted. Whereas this, I think there's real Moorishness. In terms of production, so Freddie's got Whistler Wines, who he's been doing a lot of work with. over the last few years. Sam Pfeiffer, I think how you pronounce it.
Which is the German word for whistler.
There we go. Perfect. Genius. There we go. So that explains the name. And so you got Sam to produce a Barossa Shiraz for us. Now, Whistler is quite interesting in that it was founded on cuttings from Penfold's Grange vineyard. I believe Sam's dad, or maybe granddad, was one of the viticulturalists for Penfolds, and basically nicked some cuttings from Grange and started a vineyard.
I think nicked is a bit strong. It was Martin, his dad, and he was allowed. There were only three people who were allowed to take them away. I think that's a kind of gift.
I do him a disservice.
But nicked sounds better.
Fully above board, and yeah, he's started this winery. Sam has now taken over, and is making really exciting, refreshing, actually super drinkable styles. And I have to say, this is not a wine that I'm not the buyer for Australia, and I must admit, I am not a big lover of Barossa Shiraz. I think this is absolutely stonking, and I can't say where, but it might have done quite well in a recent blind tasting that we did. I think it's just got everything that you want from a proper drinkable Aussie Shiraz. It's got wonderful purity. It's got loads of blackberry. It's got lots of pepper spice. It's got voluptuous tannin. It's got full body, and I think it's an absolute belter. If I may say so. What do you think?
I agree, and it's got a little hidden. We're talking 14.5% here. There's a little hidden punch at the end, but you've got all that delicacy and everything. So people who like their Shirazes big will suddenly find at the end, oh yeah, no, that's what I think. But actually, all the way through, I think it's textured. I think it's smooth. I think it's just. I don't know what it is. I often taste in 3D. It's like a stream of acidity coming down my tongue as well. I just think it's delicious, and it's one of those wines that you could drink on its own.
Yeah, and
it'd be fabulous with most food actually.
Yeah. And in terms of aging, I've got no idea. I think it's really good now. I've no idea what it's going to be like after a year or two's time. We
say 26.
Yeah.
But the Wine Society, the people who know our drinking windows will know that we're pretty conservative, because we want to make sure that people do drink the wines while they're in condition.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel that I've gotten the sort of length. There's a real freshness there. I think it's made to be drunk now.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I'm sure it will age, but it won't necessarily improve. Would probably be how I would argue it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the winemaker, I believe at the moment, is a guy called Michael J. Corbett. Who I believe is the winemaker at Vanguardist.
He is.
Yeah, and who is one of the kind of super trendy winemakers in Australia at the moment. And so, yeah, I think it's really great. I think people are going to love it when it comes out, and I look forward to it being released.
Yeah, me too. Now, some of these wines, and there's been a question as to whether some of these wines may be available at the AGM tasting. I don't know. Pierre usually keeps his cards close to his chest, but given this is our 150th year, and given we have special ranges, or the anniversary range of fine wine, and the generation wine, I suspect that some of these may be on show at the AGM at the end of June.
Yeah. Having already recorded the AGM tasting video, there is at least one from this.
Perfect.
And so, people will be able to taste.
No, that's great. Now, for those of you who want to continue celebrating our 150th birthday, as we do, some of us don't have a choice, and I'm delighted that that's the case. We are coming to Manchester in June with our exhibition weekend. That's 3 tastings. One, you can choose from any of those 3 tastings, 4-hour tastings, 1 on the Friday night, 2 on the Saturday. And with those tastings, there are also some optional workshops, one of which is Toby Morrill looking at Burgundy and how that's changed over the last few decades. And the other one is, coincidentally, by Sam Pfeiffer of Whistler Wines, who, along with Ben Glover of Zephyr Wines in New Zealand, they're going to be doing a masterclass on sort of modern icons of Australia. Quite modestly, I think we'll be showing their wines, to be honest. But they're a very good pairing indeed. A good pairing of blokes and a good pairing of wines too. So if you are in Manchester or would like to be in Manchester that weekend, then do join us. Equally, if Edinburgh is more your thing, then we'll be doing our final exhibition in Edinburgh in September. So take a look at our website and go on there. There's an awful lot of other 150th anniversary events going on, mini versions of those exhibitions on the road. We're taking it to Inverness, to Taunton and Plymouth, to Llandudno, to Blackpool, to York. We're going all over the place. Llandudno, brand new with the wine studies. Never been to Llandudno. Well, not deliberately anyway. From a point of view, I don't know where the van might have gone if they're going up to
West. I'll tell you that.
That's nowhere near. That's nowhere near. But yes, so we'll be in Llandudno and various other places. So do take a look on our website because there's a lot going on, and the whole year is going to be a lot of fun. I hope you found this evening fun. Thank you, Matthew, for your time. Thank you, all of you. Those of you who've come in late or had to leave early, we will be putting this out as a recording on our YouTube channel as usual. And so hello to those of you who are watching for the first time, and thank you for watching. And thanks very much. And we'll see you again in the very near future. Bye for now.